It was an Australian conference center. That was the vision for it. And they had kangaroos on the place, and the kangaroos escaped. They had monkeys in this house, and they just gave free rein to this house to these monkeys. This woman who owned it, who was a half bubble off, she would go in and read stories to the monkeys, who had, by the way, tuberculosis. They said, oh, you got what it was, 600 acres or something like that, 500, something like that.
Hey, welcome to the podcast today. On today's episode of Simple Faith, man, we get to talk to one of my favorite guests we've ever had on because he is a wild man. You never know what he's going to say next. Some of the things you may not even agree with, but you cannot question the results. Crossroads Church in Cincinnati, Ohio has seen rapid growth over its several years of existence, but especially over the last few years since the infusion of something called Man Camp, where they take a bunch of guys out in the woods and they come back changed individuals for Jesus with a passion for following Jesus and leading Christ-like families. And Brian Tome is a leader of that place, and he leads an incredible podcast as well, which is also pretty edgy, called The Aggressive Life. And I wanted to talk to him about what they're doing at the church, but also his passion for great awakenings in our culture and in our country. He's got a brand new book out called The 5 Marks of a Man, which I highly recommend. I think you're going to love today's conversation with Brian Tome. As always, I'm grateful for our sponsor and for what they're doing for us and taking us down this road and making things possible. And I think at the end of our conversation, you're going to want to share this with a friend. So make sure that you drop that information on all your social fields and media form and get the word out. Rate the podcast and review. We'd so appreciate it. But here's my conversation with Brian Tome. Brian Tome, back on the podcast. Man, I am so grateful that you are back. For our listeners that might remember you from the last episode, tell us what you've been up to. And for our listeners that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Brian Tome. I was born at a very early age, and I am one of those people known as a mega church pastor. I used to hate the title, stay away from it. I just own it. Yeah, it is what it is. I pastor a big thing, started a big thing, lead a big thing. But really, the thing that I'm most excited about these days is the work I'm doing with men and trying to get guys connected to God and trying to get guys through their valleys and their difficulties and all that stuff. And through that, the camp stuff that we're doing, which is grounded men to outside in the outdoors. And we're just seeing our camp stuff take off and reaching women and men and couples and people from just all over the country, all over the world, actually. Our next Man Camp is coming up in a few weeks, and we've got 7 countries coming in for it. And it's going to be pretty cool. So that's me, father of 3, grandfather of 5, husband of 1.
Well, congratulations on all of that. Okay, so I want to talk about the camp thing because I think last time we talked, you only did Man Camp, and it was only like once a year, if I remember right. But from what I've read, what I've seen, what I pick up on from listening to your podcast, boy, the camp thing has become big. So tell us about just that journey. What works at camp that doesn't work any other place? What are you learning there? How many of them do you do?
For almost half a century, GNPI has been creating media and sharing Jesus. From solar kits to social media, the gospel message has been on the move around the world. Because of people like you, the ministry is now 27 teams strong in 16 countries. And with the inauguration of Nomad Academy, a new generation of media makers receive training to create media and share the good news. In India, Hindi Church Online reaches hundreds of thousands of viewers per week. Projects like The Global Gospel and Amazing Stories connect with children and adults alike in their own heart languages. In fact, GNPI teams engaged over 66 million with the good news last year. But with billions still waiting, we must do more. So, where do we go from here? Mission 15. This movement will send 1 billion gospel invitations by the end of 2030. It's going to take all of us to reach this goal. What can you do? It's easy. Simply pray, share, and give. You can pray for 15 minutes that people around the world will hear the good news. You can share your faith 15 times with others. Invite them to your small group or church. You can give $15 one time or monthly. With every $15 given, 450 gospel invitations will go out. Just imagine the impact you could have over a year when you pray, share, and give. By the power of the Holy Spirit and your partnership, we at GNPI believe this audacious goal is attainable, to send 1 billion invitations to follow Jesus by the end of 2030. Will you join the movement?
Okay, well, let me give you a macro view, 30,000 foot, just basic philosophy of ministry. Rusty, if you look at the things that have changed America spiritually, if you look at the mighty moves of God since the Great Commission, really, and even before that, it was always the things that were only in class, the things that there wasn't a model for before. It was the new innovation. Jim Rayburn starting Young Life and taking kids all over the country for camps that he started, right? Taking kids, Jim Rayburn said, if you want kids to come to Sunday school, don't have it on Sunday, don't call it school. And so we started having people's homes. And they had it in funeral parlors because they were bigger. Look at Bill Bright and what he did, how he went after college campuses and the 4 spiritual laws and all that. So Hudson Taylor, China Inland Missions, getting people to go to China and grow their hair out like Chinese people and braid their hair, like to tell a 19th century white male to grow your hair into ponytails so you could fit in the culture was just mind-blowing for him. Salvation Army and what William Booth did, and getting people together and say, let's operate like an army. Let's give people like rank and file and uniforms so they can know that they're in the Lord's mission. And we're going to go kill some things in the name of God, kill poverty and all that sort of stuff. Now, those are crazy. So all those things, and I can go on and on and on and on and on and on. What's going on in America right now? Oh, another big church. Wow, I haven't seen that before. Oh, a worship video on YouTube. Oh, I haven't seen that before. Oh, LED screens. Oh, so inspiring. Oh, and hazers. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Multi-site church. Oh my goodness, that's gonna do it. Woo! No, I believe in those things. Crossroads does all those things. I'm not against those things, but those are sort of table stakes to just be in the game and in somebody's life. But it's not until you're talking about an only in class vision, because that's what a vision is. If it's not only in class, it's just your good idea. Vision is when it hasn't been seen before. Vision is when people aren't doing it before. If you're seeing it, and you're improving it, it's called best practices. And I believe we should be doing best practice. I believe I should be learning from you, Rusty, and others, and best practice. I believe in all of that. But a true vision is when it's the only thing that's happening because God birthed it in your mind and your heart, and then you go after it. I think we've got to find more leaders in America. Where are the Jim Rayburns? Where are the Bill Brights? Where are the Hudson Taylors? Where are these people? Where are they? It seems like everybody's just singing off this same sheet of music, trying to get the same publishing deal and get more YouTube followers and more Facebook fans than the next person. And so camps for us is a thing we believe that God has birthed in us, and it's an only in class thing. No one's doing it. I hope more people should do it. Get people out in the woods, poop in the woods, hike in, sleep under the stars, have campfires, talk with people around a campfire, have soul stirring worship in a tent, and preaching isn't half bad. Have the kegs of beer right next to the prayer tent, which is very intense, like crazy prayer. Some people get really threatened by it, but it's out there. And at the beginning of the weekend, the lines outside the kegs of beer are really long. And then by the end of the weekend, the line for the prayer tent is really, really long. I think last year we went through, I don't know, it was 120 kegs of beer for 2,600 people or something like that. God bless America. It was wonderful. And then if you ask us to count up the number of physical healings that people came to Christ and baptisms, those are amazing numbers too. So Yeah, that's the thing I'm most excited about right now, probably personally, and we bought more acreage for it, and it's man camp, women, couples, all that stuff, and so I go way into it. But there you go.
So you have this big plot of land. Now that you've
Yep.
purchased it, it's yours. And so what's that look like? You just set up kind of a big tent. Is it just, and there's a place to eat? And then are there activities during the day? Are we, killing what we eat? Field dressing a cat? What's happening out there?
Field dressing a cat. That's a great next level. I like that. Field dressing a cat.
Oh, it's from Santa Claus, the first one. So anyway,
Is it? That's really good. That's great. Well, we started just saying we need land. Anyone who can loan us land, great. So we borrowed land from a guy in Indiana for a couple weekends. We borrowed an old ATV park in Kentucky. We borrowed a farm down towards Lexington. And finally we said, okay, this thing works. And this is hard to set down, just like we did, Rusty, with your church, our church, every church. When you start it, you got to set up and tear down. And that's important. There's best practices of how to start a church. And it does mean you're going to, rent some place and figure out how the best way to set it up and tear down. And so after we did a good number of those, we said, you know what, this set up and tear down, we need a place that's custom designed for what we're doing. And that's when we bought land. So we found a piece of land that was I just told this story to somebody today. I probably should tell a story more. It was an Australian conference center. That was the vision for it. It was called Cross-Australia, and you would come in and have an experience of Australia while you could have like your business meetings. And they had kangaroos on the place, and the kangaroos escaped. They have no idea where they are. Like some good old boy was in a deer stand waiting to get a deer, and a kangaroo company popped a kangaroo instead of his deer. They had monkeys. They had monkeys in this house, and they just gave free rein to this house to these monkeys. These monkeys just, destroyed this house. And this woman who owned it, who's a half bubble off, she would go in and read stories to the monkeys, who had, by the way, tuberculosis. And finally, one of them chewed her fingers off one day while she was reading the book, just attacked her. So we said, oh, you got what it was, 600 acres or something like that, 500, something. So we bought that and we said, okay, it's fine. We'll work with it. So we just gradually start cultivating, and people park their cars. They walk in on a gravel road we put in. They find a place to put a tent, and they hang out. And then they come to a setting in the big top tent. Everyone brings their own chairs. You come up to the big top tent. We have a session with worship and some teaching and some fun stuff. And it's just a lot of fun. And then people go back to their tents or back to their campsites, and they have some discussions. They talk around the campfire. They have some beers they want, have some bourbons that they want, have water, have milk, whatever they want. And that's up to you. Guys, when they get together camping, they normally have different things. So you want to do that, that's fine. We like to say at Man Camp, your vices are welcome. We just don't want them to be underground and become addictions. And some people who've on that journey, we celebrate them at those camps, right? So they do that, and then we get up in the morning, they have breakfast, they're making their own breakfast, coming to the tent again, having a good session at the tent, giving people solitude time, giving them prompts, and we give them take your chair, go in the woods. Your Heavenly Father would love to meet with you. Have you ever spent an hour in silence in nature with him, with some prompts? Maybe you'll hear from God. So we do that. Then we have lunch, and then we have games after lunch, all kind of games you can participate in, watch in, whatever. It's a lot of fun. Games from relay races to arm wrestling to powerlifting, those huge concrete balls. If you want to do it, obviously I've never done that. And then then there's a time of work. There's another session. Basically I'm giving you the whole thing, but yeah, it's a wide range of things, just to do things you don't normally do, Rusty, and to feel things you don't normally feel, and to experience things you don't normally experience. And we found it to be pretty powerful.
Is it 2 days, 2 nights? How long does it last?
2 nights.
Okay.
2 nights. We used to do 1 night, but it's gonna be 2 days. Now I'm gonna use an old school term here. We're actually in October 11th to 12th. I'm using a term that used to really bother me, but I've come to embrace it. We're gonna have a revival an actual revival. Come one, come all. I don't care what gender you are, what age you are, single, married. It's going to be 38 hours, something like that. Come and go as you want, stay the night, whatever it is. So we've done them with like 1 hour, one night, but the man camp, couples camp, woman camp, they're 2-night things. Come in on a Friday, camp Friday night, Saturday night, leave Sunday.
Brian, you mentioned at the man camps that there's your vices are welcome here. Would you talk a little bit about that? Because I think there's some people listening thinking, well, wait a second. Wouldn't that be kind of detrimental to the weaker brother? Or wouldn't that be tempting fate with some guys? Wouldn't that be unbiblical to have alcohol at these events? What would you say to that?
Well, I'd start with the biggest problem we have. The biggest problem isn't alcoholism or causing someone to stumble. The biggest problem is men don't feel welcome in spiritual environments. The biggest problem is the average guy feels like he can't be himself when he's around Christians. That's why he doesn't come to church. That's why 70% of all churches are full of women. So the big problem is that. That's the big problem that we're trying to solve. And most guys, when they get around a campfire, they have beer. I'm not saying all of them. I'm just saying they do. So why would we have a camping experience when in any other setting someone's going to have a couple beers, but in this setting you can't? When the Bible doesn't say it's wrong. The Bible does not say it's wrong. Jesus turned water into wine, and sorry, it was alcohol wine. The wine steward declared it as better than any previous wine. So the only reason we put a barrier and not have it is because one of two reasons. One, we're going to cause somebody to stumble. We haven't caused anybody to stumble unless we've caused the legalistic Christian to stumble. They're the only ones that we cause to stumble because we give them reasons to judge us. Nobody who's an alcoholic has stumbled that I'm aware of. First of all, if you're in AA, in recovery, the thing is you have to be, you're to be around, you have to get to a place in recovery where you are around certain circles where alcohol is being used responsibly. AA's goal is not to remove everybody from alcohol. It's to remove them from abusing alcohol and perhaps using alcohol. So part of recovery is to be around people who are using alcohol. Another issue with it is we have some groups where there is no alcohol because it's a bunch of people who are in recovery, and for them that would be hurtful. We also have some people who have been group leaders who we fired and never group leader again because they were using alcohol inappropriately and insensitively around the campfire with people who were in recovery. And we said, no, what are you doing? What are you doing passing a bottle of bourbon around? Like making it like a fun thing where you just, no, stop, you're done, So there can be problems, and we eliminate those problems. I just believe we've eliminated too much problem and we've taken away potency by not having alcohol healthily available in an event like this. And Jesus says, wisdom is proven right by our children. So I just say, look at thousands of people we baptized at man camp, the people who have a spiritual home they didn't have anywhere. And it just works.
Did you know that there's more than 6 billion people who do not know Jesus, don't have a relationship with him? 3 billion that don't even know his name, haven't even heard of him. Good News Productions International is working to solve that problem. GNPI has been working for decades now to help use media to help people come to know and find and follow Jesus. You can check out more from gnpi.org, but you can also go and be a part of their bold initiative to share the gospel over 1 billion times in the next few years. Check out mission15.global or go to gnpi.org. I'm going to ask you to sign up through mission15.global and pledge $15 a month. That's like a latte or two in order to help people come to know Jesus globally. The work they do is incredible, and you're going to want to hear all about it on our podcast with Mike Schrage. So check that out, and check out GNPI and the work they're doing, mission15.global, and be a part of it today. So Okay, this is one thing I wanted to ask you about because I've heard you talk about this, and I think you've already probably stepped into this in our talking already. But the difference between a revival and an awakening.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that, because I think the term revival is coming back. We've been doing revivals the past few years, and we love it. But talk to us about the difference between those two words, because it's significant.
Yeah, it is significant. At least it is for how I'm approaching things, Rusty. And I would say one guy who's been helping me with this, I believe is the world's foremost authority in revivals and awakening, is Michael McClymond, who's written 2 encyclopedias containing every revival and awakening that's happened since since Acts chapter 2, and everyone that was over 100 or something, or over 1,000. 2 encyclopedias. I mean, he's
Wow.
And Michael would say, has told me, he said, "Hey, I'd be really careful how you parse those 2 terms." He would prefer that I don't parse those 2 terms, make those the same thing. But from what helps me, I'm more of a practitioner than a theologian or a historian. I think this is still historically accurate. This is where I'm looking at in terms of practically. Revivals, I believe historically and practically, revivals are where there are people of faith and they come to a place and their faith gets revived. Mm-hmm. They had faith, but it had gone dormant, or it was stale, or they were lukewarm, or they just weren't fresh. And they go to something and they get revived. Now, interesting, Rusty, with these revivals and awakenings, I'll get to in a moment, all of them are planned. So that was kind of my attitude. I used to have bad attitude a long time ago. I'd be driving through the country. I'd see some church sign with that said "Revival this Sunday night," and I would just very cynically say, "Oh yeah, well, the Holy Spirit's coming here Sunday night. Get ready. We're planning for it. He's going to come. He's going to come." And I thought, that's so ridiculous. Who knows what the Spirit does? The Spirit goes from here and there. Jesus likens the Spirit to wind. You can't predict it. Yeah, I get that. I understand that. But when there is revival, somebody has prayed about it. Somebody has planned for it. Somebody has put some structure in place. Now, whether the Holy Spirit fills that structure or not is up to the Holy Spirit. But revivals are planned. All of them are. Like, one of the ones that you and I should be most aware of is, because it's in both of our backyards, and probably you know more about it than I do, is the Cane Ridge Revival. Have you ever been there, Rusty?
I have. Yeah. Multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, 20,000 people show up over the course of a week or so. It's a Presbyterian guy who says, we always do this communion festival thing for us Presbyterians. Why don't we just tell any church, anybody, anywhere, if you want to come up and hang out and do your own thing, we'll just kind of be together and see what God does. And my gosh, like, freaking took off. They say that around the Cane, and it's called Cane Ridge because when Daniel Boone surveyed the area, he said this ridge has some cane on it. That's why it's called on his map. So it's Cane Ridge Revival, right? And so they said that people came from everywhere, all over the place, and they destroyed the place because people brought their oxen, their horse, they needed to eat, and so they just pillaged all the countryside and everything, which is why there's only one, because after one, all the locals put up fences so it wouldn't happen again, so they wouldn't lose their crops and all that stuff. They said that they said that when you came to it, and this is from people who had been to New York, northern New York, they said coming to it from miles away was like coming to Niagara Falls. The rush of voices, the rush of activity, the buzz, there was just a roar. And part of it was in bourbon country, and spirits were flowing freely. And that's just history. And there was this strange amalgamation. So okay, there we go. That was a revival. It was planned. People's spirits were being revived. Now, Cane Ridge Revival, you could maybe also call it awakening, what I view an awakening as, or I'm reserving that term for, is an awakening is when a move of God's Spirit comes upon a region and there is societal and systemic change. as a result
Hmm.
of high numbers of people coming into first-time faith with God and them living and acting out their act. That is an awakening. Revivals, you can do with your church budget. You can just figure some stuff out and pray about it and set it up, and maybe something can happen. When you start talking about awakening, it's a different level of vastness, a different level of faith, different level of impact, and they're also, by the way, always very, very pricey. They cost a lot. George Whitefield did, we go back and forth from the Atlantic to from North America to Europe, all the time. It's no big deal. Back then, to make that trip,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, no GPS, no Weather Channel, no nothing, no idea. Just wooden haul ships, no refrigeration, to store food for the long journey, no HVAC. No, it was utterly brutal. George Whitefield made that trip 6 times round trip. Reason being, because he had to go back to England to raise money to come back and tell these colonies about Jesus. Whitefield had like 15,000 people in one location where he was preaching to. And we know that because Ben Franklin counted it. And we know it's accurate because Ben Franklin wasn't a Christian, and he was just reporting what he saw. People said to Franklin, he said, why do you go hear Whitefield preach? You don't even believe what he believes. And he said, I know, but he believes it. He was turned on by his faith, his zeal that he saw. And what Whitefield did went up and down the seaboard. And it actually, what Whitefield and Wesley did is that awakening. And there's known as the Great Awakening, and there was a second Great Awakening after the Revolutionary War. The Great Awakening, it's known as awakening because it awoke the country. It went from 15% attending church to 55% attending church after it. It swept across the country, and these colonists went from a religious place, a spiritual place, where the king was the head of their church. The church and state were one, and their king was basically the Pope, right? I mean, that's right. What the king or queen of England is. They're the defender of the faith,
the sovereign,
right? So they go from that, they come over to America, and then they start hearing about this personal relationship with Christ, giving your life, and God cares about you personally, and you can talk with God personally, whether or not you ever go to the Church of England. And this revolutionized people. Wait, God cares about me personally? He knows me personally? I have a personal relationship with God? And that radicalized their faith. And historians are very clear, that's why the Revolutionary War took place. Because you had a hotbed of people who no longer had their identity of their faith tied to the Church of England, tied to England, tied to the King of England. It was tied to Jesus. He is my king. And you had a high percentage of people who said, wait a minute, God cares about my personal freedom. God cares about a future here. And I can rebel against this king, and we should, because our personal interests are cared for by God. And that was the seedbed of the revolution that made America what it is today. It was because of that awakening.
Okay, so I want to make this even more personal, because I've seen some of this just in your own style of leadership. Now, I know we've talked about megachurch and all the different stylistic changes, but when I think back to attending your church back when you were still in a school, I think you were in a high school or middle school or wherever you were meeting.
Yeah.
And I drive up from Lexington just to check it out. And now when I watch it online, it's totally different. It went from very seeker, right. I wouldn't even say sensitive, but driven, no worship music.
Seeker obsessed. Yes.
Seeker obsessed, exactly. And now it's borderline charismatic at times. Is some of that just your own personal, kind of progression, or is it, I think it's a different time and God's using a different tool now?
It's a little both, Rusty. I would, I believe that prime time to reach people is still on Sunday mornings.
Right.
So the question still becomes, or Saturday nights or Thursday nights, whatever your weekly gathering is, when those things are. So the question becomes, what has the most firepower to reach someone there? So when we started Crossroads in 1996, March 24th, 1996, the cultural landscape was everybody had a memory of church, like everybody did. I mean, there was exceptions, but everyone did. Everybody, when you went to the hospital and you checked your religion, everybody checked Christian. Everybody. There was, a small percentage was Muslim or Hindu, but that was just a thing. Everybody said to themselves, someday I'm going to have to go back to church. Everyone said to themselves, I'm going to have a kid someday, and I guess we'll go back to church. There was this, it was sort of in the cultural framework. Well, in that context, what you want is someone to go, okay, I guess I got to go back to church. My kid needs to find some Christian education, I guess. Okay, I'm having trouble with my marriage. I don't do. Maybe I'll go to church. Okay, 9/11 hit. I got to go back to church. There's these things. So when you go to a church in that setting, when that's kind of your background, the goal is for it not to suck. So they leave and they go, hey, that wasn't kind of bad. I laughed a little bit. I heard something I didn't know before. Yeah, I think I want to go back. Okay. That's where people were. So you customize a service that doesn't suck and has a level of engagement to it, right? Today, when someone comes to church, no one's coming to church today because they're saying, you know what? I just think I ought to get back to church. That's a good thing. I think my kids need a church. Those cultural expectations are gone. Someone's coming to church now for one reason. They want to know if there's a God. And if there's a God, they want to feel him or her or it. Whatever. They're like, whatever. They want to know, like, is there something offered here that's beyond the mundane? Is there something transcendent? So yes, we structure our stuff to say, hey, if there's something transcendent here, that would be great. And that also just parallels my journey as well, Rusty. I get tired of the old secret playbook of give people a proverb and a video clip and send them on their way. Yeah, that wouldn't do it for me anymore. And
Or
I didn't think
drama.
or drama back in the days, right? Drama. But yeah, it's I still would say, if you're an unbeliever, we're the best game in town for you, and you're going to want to come, and you're going to love it. I still say that. But what that is, for when I say game in town, I guess I'm not comparing to the churches. I'm just going, like, anything you're going to do outside of a vibrant church experience, this is you're gonna want to be here instead of in the middle of the woods getting one with God and saying Om. You're gonna want to do that. And I think that I lost my train of thought, but yeah, so that's where I was back then in 96, and today where I still am. The nice thing about where I am today is it's a much easier way to meet some of the needs of believers and unbelievers simultaneously. That just happens to be a nice thing.
Okay, so walk me through how you coach a worship leader to allow that to happen, because you and I both know the way our brains work versus the way worship leaders' brains work are totally different. You've joked about that before on your podcast, which I find incredibly humorous. But you're up there teaching, and you can kind of go, all right, I sense God is doing this. I'm going to roll with it. But that looks different for a worship leader who's got everything all clicked out and timed out and the slides and that whole deal.
Right.
What do you tell them about allowing that transcendent experience to happen?
Right. Yes. Well, it depends on your worship leader. I mean, some of them, they don't get to go off script because they're not good enough. Like, look, you got your tracks and you got your thing, and you bless God with your best, but you're calling audibles in the middle of nothingness. You can't. No, you can't. You're not there yet. Hopefully someday, you're not there yet. If you're talking just about like a momentary sensing of the Spirit, what would bless people? It's another way to say it. What would bless people? I'll give you an example. 2 weekends ago, we were doing a song with the holiness of God. I can't remember the song. I can't remember the chorus, but the word holy was in it. And I came up on stage, it was during the run through, We do a full service run through. I came up to save during the run through and decided to interrupt the song. And I did this whole riff in the middle of there about Isaiah 6 and how God is holy and we're not him. He's distinct. He's distinct. He's distinct. He's other than, other than, other than. He's only in category. There is him and there is not you. And I just kind of went into that whole thing. It was a really, really powerful moment. And that one, the worship band just sits back, and let me do my thing, and I leave. I have a good sense of the moment. But then we've got to figure out, okay, what's that do to our tracks? Do we have tracks in that song? Can we pause the tracks? Yeah, you got to work that stuff out,
Well, now the timing's all off. What are we going to do? I love it.
And we've done that before. And what we do is that timing's all off, and then the worship leader just goes, "Okay, everybody, we have to reset our systems right now." And you take 2 seconds and you reset it, and no one in the room minds. No one minds at all. It's actually a moment of vulnerability, and that would have been like the old seeker days. It would have been like never show a chink in the armor,
right?
Always polish.
Right.
Always. And that's not where people are today. They want a genuine experience.
Well, it's funny that people that, remember anything I have to say, it's usually after I've screwed up or messed up or got tongue tied or whatever. Oh, remember that time? That was so funny. And there was a service one time where a dude actually fell asleep, which happens all the time, but he began snoring so loud.
I love that.
He was snoring so loud, everybody could hear it. I could hear it on stage. So we're all laughing about it, and people still talk about that moment. That was awesome.
Well, and we had sometimes a worship leader wants to do something, and you just have to say no.
Yeah.
Like I had one of our worship leaders who's very gifted, capable, very trustworthy. He can take a moment. He has the gift of tongues. I don't have the gift of tongues. And, very popular thing right now. And you can see it growing on YouTube and such, is some of these great worship leaders, they'll do a riff where you can tell they're praying in tongues. They're doing their thing, and it kind of fits with the harmony of the song. And it's off the side, and other people are, and I'm fine with that. I've been in a situation where that's there, and that's great, awesome, fine, let's go. I can't do it, but I'm past feeling inferior like I used to, and I'm also past feeling judgmental. But what I also said to him was, I said, when he said, "Hey, if I bring out tongues in the song," and I said, "Do you have somebody who's going to interpret them? Because if you have someone interpreting them, I think it's great." And he looked at me like, I said, "Well, I'm just going by the Bible here. Prophecy is great because everyone understands it, but tongues should only be happening if you have someone to interpret so that everybody knows what it is." I said, "Yeah, that's a good point." So we didn't. Now, so it's just a bunch of Christians around who are. So I think that's Bible, and that's also old seeker days, right?
Yeah.
They all come together.
Yeah.
So if you're just talking about just a bunch of Christians making Christians have an experience with God, a bunch of Christians are fine to hear other people going in tongues. Doesn't bother them at all. But man, we got unbelievers here. We need to be having unbelievers here. And I'm up for really something supernatural and crazy, but we're going to make sure people know what it is and we get to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the line. You see the line of difference there?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, I want to ask you about your new book. Your last book, Move, which I think was your first book you put out. It was a devotion for men. It's fantastic. But this book is about the 5 marks of a man. Buddy, I can't tell you how many times I've shared this talk, because you shared it on your podcast, The Aggressive Life. I've shared this with so many guys, especially like young guys, like in college, newly married, whatever it is, because the definition of manhood has been all over the map for especially the last 5 or 6 years. But can you just walk us through these 5 marks of a man and just drill down as much as you want to on each one of them?
Yeah, would love to. So yeah, there's such a thing as 15-year-old men, and there's such a thing as 45-year-old boys. It's not an age thing. It's an attitude thing. It's a character thing. And these 5 things, I think all your listeners will realize, if they can find somebody in history that they respect, or somebody in their life right now that they respect, they have all 5 of these things, all 5 of these marks. They're not in any particular order. I'll just share one first because we mentioned it earlier. One is, a man has vision and a boy lives day to day. So men are able to see something in the future that they want to go after. And the thing that happens with every vision is visions come with time and difficulty.
Hmm.
There's always a time lag and there's always a difficulty component. That's why boys are never into a vision, because they don't want to wait and they don't want anything to be hard. They just want a good day.
Hmm.
But a man has a vision for his life and goes after that. Another one is man is a team player and a boy wants to be MVP. So a man will embrace the idea of marriage because they realize it's the greatest team there is. A boy will want to push off marriage forever and ever and ever, doesn't want to be in that team because he realizes he's going to have to do what somebody else wants him to do. And he can't have that. He's going to push that off. A man will wire his business and organize his business around a concept of team, whereas a boy will organize his business around him being the hierarchical king of all things, and everyone does what he says. Just men operate in team. Men are drawn to sports because they're team sports, so that's another one. Another one is men take a minority position. Boys always have to be in the majority. When you're a man, you are going to have values that the rest of society doesn't have. If you're a man, get used to voting for people who never win election, because culture isn't going to have your values. The boys are like pigeons in the street, right? They're just wandering around, pecking for little stuff. They make a lot of noise, and then they fly out, shit on everybody. That's a boy, Men are the falcons. Cincinnati has them, a couple families of falcons, peregrine falcons, that have decimated the pigeon population. They sit up top, and I remember going to dinner one time at the Metropolitan Club in Northern Kentucky, and right out the window is a huge falcon. Like, that's where I learned about these things. Yeah. And they look for these birds and they come down and they devastate them. They win every time. That's what keeps the pigeon population at bay in Cincinnati. And that's what the man. Men are fewer. There's fewer of us. But toe to toe with a boy will win every single time. Just devastates, because we're used to being the minority. We know that's the way it is. Men work, boys play. A man is fixated on when he can retire. A boy is fixated on when he can retire because he wants to go play. A man is fixated on how he can keep working his whole life. Doesn't mean you're going to be in corporate America your whole life. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to pull 50-hour weeks your whole life. But a man is always going, what value can I add? How can I bless culture? Adam was working in the garden before sin ever happened. He was placed on earth to work. So when a man or woman choose to diss work, we're dissing our identity that God has given us. So men work. We embrace work, whether it comes as a volunteer or paid, whatever it is. We enjoy that. Boys just want to play. They want to have a good time. They want to be happy. They want to have games, and that's why they stay boys and don't get ahead in life. And then the last one, I think that's 4, 5.
Predator.
There it is. Men are protectors, boys are predators. Boys take. Much of this book, Rusty, was born out of me being a horrible son to my dad. I was just a boy. I was a boy for, I was a boy till, I don't know, 21, 22. Shoot, I mean, I still have boyish ways. None of us are perfect on all these things. But my dad, I just took from him. There wasn't a rule my dad had that I didn't break. There wasn't any money around the house I didn't steal for a card game. There wasn't a car that he had that I didn't wreck. I just took. And that's what boys do. Boys take girls' virginity, not think of the long term. Boys take credit for themselves. Boys steal. They're just self-focused, and so they just assume if I can have it, I'm going to take it. Whereas a man protects. He thinks that's somebody's daughter over there, or that's somebody's future wife, or that's an asset of God's that needs nurtured and taken care of, whatever that is. We protect, and we embrace that. We actually want to stay in shape because we want to be able to physically protect. If we have to physically protect, we don't let our bodies go to nothing, because we want to be competent. We want to be able to do things, to work the land. We have to work to pick things up, to punch somebody if they need punched. Sometimes violence is the answer. People hate being told that. Honestly can't recall a time I ever used physical violence. Maybe once. All I'm saying is there is there's a capacity, a capability that we have to have as men to be men, and we have to be aware of that. Okay,
so I just want to draft off of that for just a second, because I think that we hear this a lot in our churches. Women will come up and say, I wish my husband would be the spiritual leader in my home. You had a great answer on your podcast about a man who did write in and ask, how should I be the spiritual leader in my home? You had some great answers for that. Any thoughts come off the top of your head about what you would say to a guy to step up and lead in the home? And we tend to think about that in the term of a protection, or somebody's breaking in and you beat them to death. But it's smaller than that. It's little things. And what would you say to that?
Yeah, it's serving your wife. It's doing the vacation she wants instead of the vacation you want. Finding money in the budget and shifting it around to take her out if she's the one who normally cooks the food, and you're going to not have her cook tonight. You're going to shift that around. You're going to meet her needs. It's you take on, if you got kids, you take on the responsibility that you're going to be the one that tucks in the kids every single night, because you're going to serve your wife because she's probably tired. And by the way, then you get to pray with your kids every single night. You're the one. You're the one. It's those things. And I think that a lot of women, Rusty, have just got some really cattywampus ideas of what it means for a man to be the leader of the home. I actually find that women want this more than men do. Women come up to me and go, would you help my husband to become the leader of the home? Or I want my husband to become the leader of the home. And I ask like what that means. And they'll normally always say something that includes leading weekly Bible studies with the whole family. And I always point out, well, you realize that I never did that with my family. I only did it twice, because both times my kids cried. And I realized I wasn't any good at it. And I'm pretty good at the Bible. I'm pretty good at leading things. So if your husband isn't doing that, that doesn't mean that's not leadership in the home. If you want a Bible study, find someone to give you a Bible study. In fact, there's a lot of people who can give Bible studies. They're not leading, And then I also want to tell women, I think the expectations for your husband are probably too high. I would tell him about that. I tell it to men all the time. Your expectations for your wife are too high. Your expectations for what body parts are big and what body parts are small, those expectations are too high. Stop it. Your expectations of your wife being able to be, help that family out financially, and then also, be Betty Crocker, it's too high. No, stop. Your expectations that your wife is going to be incredibly funny and winsome, and then also very deep and caring. Just careful here. And I'd say the same to the wife. You expect your husband to be a Bible study leader, to be your personal pastor, to be the cheerleader for tithing, to relax. My gosh, calm down. If you got a husband who believes in Jesus and wants to go to church, you're in the top 1%. Calm down. My gosh. How about a little gratitude? Just relax a little bit.
Are you passionate about this, Brian?
I am. I don't know who's filling in women about what a godly man looks like. I'm obviously not qualified to be a godly husband to many women out there, and I think I'm pretty good. I really do. I just think we have unrealistic expectations. Your attitudes are just false. They're wrong. They're not rooted in history either.
Well, I blame it all on the Hallmark movies. I think that's where it all went wrong.
Yeah.
So suddenly we're now all supposed to be these guys named, Twinkle, that live on a Christmas tree farm.
Women are always accusing men of doing the wrong thing in conflict, of doing the wrong thing and don't solve my problem. Wait, you want me to be the leader, but you don't want me to solve your problem. Okay, I don't have to solve your problem, but stop saying I'm not the leader, because that's what leaders do. We solve problems. So don't there's just like misses that we have.
Hey, Brian, this has been great today. Always grateful for you. Would you just let our people know, first of all, about your podcast, where they can find it and what it is, and then second of all, where they can find your books?
Great. Well, my podcast is called The Aggressive Life with Brian Tome, and you can find more about me or articles I've written and other links at briantome.com. And I've got a book out called The 5 Marks for Man, and I've also got a devotional out called Move, and I also have a guide for groups to do together based on the 5 Marks for Man. And I've also got a 5 Marks for Man devotional coming out in a few months. So, yeah, a lot going on.
It's great, buddy. Well, I always love listening to you every week on your show, but I love talking with you even more. Thank you for being so kind as to be on the show again. The third time, you get a T-shirt. So
that was the third time?
No.
Third time.
The third time will be the next time. That's when you get a set of steak knives as well.
Oh, yum.
Buddy, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.
All right, Rusty. Always a pleasure.
Well, Brian, thank you so much. Thanks for keeping our editors busy as well. I don't know what you thought about that. You might have loved it. You might have been upset about it, but you got to think about it. And it makes us all think about doing whatever it takes to reach people for Christ. In the words of Paul, I become all things to all people in order to reach them. As we like to say around here, and this isn't new for us, but to quote the great Craig Groeschel, we'll do anything short of sin to see people come to know Jesus. And I think that's what Jesus was after when he talked about a shepherd who risks everything to go and find the lost one. Well, hope you got something out of this today. Share it with a friend. We'll be back next week with brand new content. And as always, keep it simple.